Hey everyone, Sycra here, and today I'm doing a speed sketch, and I'm going to be talking about stuff that's unrelated to the speed sketch that I'm doing, but will hopefully be of use to some people. So, lately I get a lot of emails from people asking me things like, what school should I go to? Or have I heard any good things about this or that art school? And clearly it's from students who want to get into art school. And I don't really know much about art schools, but what I do know is they tend to be very expensive, at least in North America, they tend to be very expensive. And there's not much in terms of standards for getting in, with the exception of a few schools, like I think Sheridan, Cal Arts, Art Center. I think these are ones I know have a standard to get in. But what surprises me more than anything is that there is so much news about these predatory schools where they're basically not going to teach you much, but they just want your money and they promise a lot. And I saw some recent documentaries and things on these schools about how, so their whole thing is to spend a lot of their money on marketing, and then they, convince students like, oh, this is great and you should go here. And then the school costs a lot. Like, for me, it cost around $20,000 for a year, and if you were an international student, I think it was around 40,000. And so on top of that, you get scholarships. And then when I was listening to this stuff about the schools, like Art Institute is a very well-known school for being horrible. And just like what they have is, and I'm speaking from what my brothers told me, because he went to Art Institute before he went to the school that I went to. But they have a lot of fancy equipment, a lot of, like, the school looks nice. That's the thing. The school looks really nice. But then the actual education you receive is not as good. And also, the scary thing is, I realized the school I went to was pretty much exactly like these schools. And it's a for-profit art school. So the first thing was that gave it away, and I guess this is just going to be a bit of a story time. But anyway, first thing that gave it away to me was I was not really nervous about getting into the art school, because I was okay. I went to school in 2010, and that's when I was 26. So for all of you who are 19 and who are saying, oh, I'm too young, or I'm too old, or 20 years old, it's like, well, you're not too old. But anyway, before that, I was self-taught. And so I was thinking, like, okay, I should be pretty good to at least get in. And I knew my brother got in. And so it's like, well, I know his level, and it's like, yeah, I think I can do stuff to his level. So I wasn't worried about that. So they told me the initial price is like 20,000 something or other. And I'm like, no, I can't afford that. Are there any scholarships? And basically they're like, yeah, we can give you this much. And then I'm like, no, that's not good enough. And it's like, oh, it's okay. We can give you a bigger scholarship. It's like, wow, all I have to do is keep asking. Like, okay, so if I just keep asking for more money for a scholarship, they seem to give it. And I got it like, I think $5,000 in the scholarship. But anyway, so it's like, okay, so that's that. And then when I went into the school, because like I got accepted and everything, then I saw the work of other students, and it was like a pretty big spectrum. But there were some people who were really, really in the early stages, like maybe I would say you look at kids in elementary school, and a lot of the kids I remember from my class in elementary school who didn't draw at all and weren't artists were better than some of these people. And so I asked him, like, well, I didn't ask him, how did you get in? Because that would be kind of mean. But I found out, like, some of these ones got scholarships too. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. You got a scholarship too? And it's like, and I said, oh, how'd you get a scholarship? And they said, oh, I just asked, and they looked at my portfolio, and they said, yeah, this is good, and you can get in. And then I had a friend who didn't get a scholarship, and I said, oh, did you get a scholarship as well? And he's like, no. And I said, oh, how come? It's like, well, I don't know. They never gave me one. And I said, oh, did you ask? And he's like, no. And I'm like, oh, man, that sucks. Just because you didn't ask. But anyway, I was going into school with a very specific motive in mind. I had two big reasons I wanted to go to school. One is, or maybe three. So the first reason is I would see the work of animators, and they had a different line quality. Like, their works just looked really alive. Compared to what I had been doing before, that was mostly fine art stuff and caricature stuff. But my caricatures still looked pretty stiff. And whenever I saw animators, it's like, whoa, your lines are super cool. You've got gesture, you've got energy, you've got life in your stuff. And they had better storytelling. And it seemed like they had more form, more construction, more three-dimensionality to their work. So that was the first thing. How do I get my work to be more gestural and like free and flowy and stuff, and not be super stiff? Because that was something I kept hearing all the time. People would look at my work and say, oh, it's okay, but man, it's really stiff. So that was the first thing. And then the second thing was that I was really afraid of animation because of the workload, or what I perceived to be the workload. Like, I imagined animators as people who just sat in front of a desk and they didn't get up from their desk, and they just had thousands of sheets of paper to go through, and they would do a drawing, and then they would put on the next sheet and do the same drawing but slightly different, and then slightly different and slightly different. Then when you added all these drawings together, it would be like movement and stuff, but it seemed like the most boring thing. And I thought, I can't imagine doing that. It's too much drawing. It's too boring. And so I was really fearful of animation. And so I thought, well, if I actually go to an animation school and learn animation, it's only going to be a year. So even if it's like the worst, scariest, most boring thing, it's going to be a year. And after that, at least I would have gone through that. So I would be stronger. And I think it's pretty good to confront your fears in a way, instead of just being, because sometimes you don't know, because I really didn't know. It's like, oh, this is my perception of animation, that it's a ton of drawings. And I mean, it's kind of dumb to listen to myself now, because it's like, well, you're an artist, you're going to be doing a ton of drawings anyway, but why would you be afraid of drawing? But I kind of was at the time, because I guess I was a type of lazy artist, and maybe I'll talk about that later. But anyway, so that was the second thing, is my fear, and I wanted to overcome my fear. And then the third thing was almost this social thing that like a pressure. And it was that whenever I would talk to people, they would ask me, what school did you go to? And like, oh, what university or anything? And I didn't. Like, I had high school and then nothing until I was 26. So I don't know. It felt kind of like I was missing this thing. I didn't know what school was. I had improved a lot without any schooling. So I thought, well, maybe I'll learn more from school. And I didn't know, like, well, how good are you going to get? And with my brother, he did have quite a bit of improvement, I think, from when I saw his work before he went to school and after he went to school. But he's younger than me. And so I had more years of self-taught stuff. And so it was really that, and like just not wanting to see this expression where you say, oh, I never went to school, and then people kind of look at you like, oh, okay, as if you're kind of not too bright. So I figured, okay, at least then I could say, yeah, I went to art school, which now seems ridiculous to me because it's so unimportant. But anyway, so those were my 3 reasons. And none of those reasons, you'll notice, have anything to do with actually becoming an animator. So I think because I wasn't going to school to become an animator, I didn't have to worry as much as some of the other students, because a lot of them came in thinking like, I'm going to be an animator, I'm going to be a director, I'm going to be a character designer and stuff. And the reality is, the education you receive is not that, or at least for me, it wasn't that great. I learned some things, so it's not like I went away with nothing. I did learn some things. I learned sort of the pipeline of animation and what's actually involved. You learn how to be a good student, which means how to be a good tool, or how to be a good employee, which means how to be a good tool. And we had like people come over to the school, and they would say things like it would be a lecture from a person in the industry, and they would talk about the 3 things that are important. There are 3 qualities that an artist should have or could have, and you only need 2 of them to get a job. And one of them is you need to be super good. The other one is you need to be super dependable and meeting your deadlines, and you get your work done all the time. And the third one is you need to be a nice person. And so if you're any of those 2, if you're good and you're nice, people will be, lenient if you don't make your work, put your work in on time. But if you're really nice and you're fun to be around and you always meet your deadlines, then it doesn't really matter if you're not the best, because people will still want to work with you. And so there's a similar thing for commissioning work, that it's either going to be one of 3 things, or you can have 2 of 3 things. It can be cheap, so it doesn't cost a lot. It can be fast, so you deliver it quickly, or it can be high quality. So you can have 2 of those. You can have it be inexpensive and high quality, but then it's not going to be fast. You can have it fast and high quality, but then it's not going to be cheap. Or you can have it cheap and fast, but then it's not going to be high quality. So we got told that. And then we also got told that, remember, you are a tool. You are a tool to get a job done. And the people who do well in the animation industry get along with everybody, and no one has any ego. And so I thought, oh, this is important. This is very important, to not have an ego and not really think about, I want to be this, or I want to be that. And then they'd also talk to you about stories of people who kind of worked up in the ranks to achieve something. And it's like, okay, so that's kind of what I was thinking. Okay, you have to sort of keep your head down, do the work. And they would say, remember, you're a tool. And that kind of bothered me, this idea that, oh, you're just a tool. Because I guess as artists, a lot of us go into art because we're a bit rebellious, because we don't quite fit in. And that's very much my case. I don't think I could fit in to a normal 9-to-5 job. Like, the idea of it, even now, it's too much for me to handle. I don't know how I would live. And so, because I've had jobs I've hated, but they've never been like a career. I can't imagine every day you just go to your 9-to-5. And I'm not putting down anybody who is going through that, because if you can go through that, you are a much stronger person than I am. But anyway, so at the end of the school year, what happened was you kind of, go in thinking, like, a lot of students are like, yeah, I'm going to be an animator, yeah, I'm going to be a character designer, and you start applying to studios, and what happens is you start to realize nobody wants you for those jobs, and it goes from, yeah, I'm going to be a character designer to, you know, you apply, you send out your designs and you're not getting any work, and then it's like, oh, well, you know, people might ask you, oh, did you get work yet? Are you in a job? And it's like, no, maybe, I don't know. And then you start to get like pressure, like, oh, shoot, okay, let me apply as an animator. I wanted to be a character designer, but maybe I'll get in as an animator. And then it's like, oh, maybe nobody's hiring as an animator. It's like, oh, shoot. And then the panic sets in, and it starts to be this feeling of, I need to pay back my student loans, because I had a lot of student loans as well. But it's this thing of, I saw it in my peers, because for me, again, I wasn't trying to be an animator. So when I got out of school, I just went back to whatever I was doing before school. But for a lot of my friends, it was like this case of, okay, so I will take anything, just give me anything. And then a lot of them ended up as riggers, or, you know, just jobs that you might not think you want to be going in. And what happens is a lot of these people become jaded. I remember my storyboard teacher, she talked about how she hates drawing. Like, drawing is work to her. And she said she will never pick up a pencil and draw anything unless someone's paying her. And I was like, wow, that's pretty extreme. Like, isn't drawing something that should be fun? And isn't it something that should be for you? But no, it became this thing of just, I draw all the time, all day, and that's work. And the last thing I want to do when I get home is draw. And I thought that was really sad. Because it seems like people go in all with hopes and dreams, and they end up coming out really jaded and cynical. And you'll have the few people who actually do become the character designer or the animator. But it's like, out of a class of 20, maybe one or two, and then out of a class of, like, it really depends. And the thing I noticed is the people who did get those jobs, they tended to have experience even before coming to school. Like, they weren't the ones who were just completely new. And they also did a ton of work that behind the scenes. They were working on other projects, on their own stuff. And so it's like, well, you're basically just doing self-taught stuff for the most part, and then going to school and doing the assignments. But really, you're driven, and you've had experience beforehand. So it was something that was really strange. And then the other thing that happens is, I felt that the people, after a while, that are working, that just got a job, they'll keep telling them stuff that, when I asked them, you know, how's work, and they tended to whine about it, how bad it is. But then they would say, like, oh, but, you know, I'm in animation, and so that's great. I get to work on cartoons all day. And it felt sort of fake. Like, I don't know. Maybe it wasn't, but to me, it sort of felt like, are you just saying this so you don't have to feel bad about your job? And another one of my, I guess, mentor / friends is that he worked as in 3D in animation, and he told me about how in the animation studios you would get these tours, like school tours, because I went on a tour with the school to an animation studio as well, and you get these tours, and then they're told, like, oh, a tour is coming, so be happy and look like you're having fun. So everybody in the studio got all happy and excited when the school tour came. And it's like, oh, yeah, hey, yeah, we're working on this project and whatever. And then as soon as, like, the tour leaves, everyone collapses and, like, ugh, and they go back to their work, because this is what they do every day for hours and hours and hours. It, like, as fun as you think it might be at first, it gets draining. And so that was very, I guess that's something that I didn't feel was talked about, really. And I actually asked this guy, like, oh, maybe you should share your experience of like the realities of working in a studio like this. And I guess it's a bit scary, I suppose, to bring that out and to say, especially because you might not get hired if you're saying this stuff. So, yeah. So then I started to wonder, what is it about school anyway that makes us want to go there? What is so important about it, or what do you get from it? And there are schools that are touted as being good schools, so I can't really fault the schools that I haven't had experience with. But I'm talking more about just the basic art schools. Like, you're not an art center, you're not super hard to get in or something. What is it? And I start to ask myself, because I also got this feeling of, it's the same thing behind what brushes do I use, or looking for a video. And I think for myself anyway, it came down to fear. Like, I was really afraid that because people would say you just need to work hard, practice makes perfect and stuff. But what scared me is, what if I work really hard and at the end I'm still not good enough? And I started wondering if a lot of the people that talk to me, that send me emails and stuff, don't have the same fear. Because if you think about it, well, one of the hardest things in life that I've seen is taking responsibility for your actions. And some people can, and I think for me, I tried to take responsibility for my actions, but I have met so many people who, for them, taking responsibility is like the hardest thing. They would rather be in debt than be responsible. And so it's this thing of, okay, let's say you're really afraid of taking responsibility, right? Like, you don't want it to be your fault. And you're thinking, okay, I want to become an artist. Well, if you are self-taught, then it's kind of hard because no one is to blame but yourself, right? Like, if you fail, who's to blame? Just you. But if you go to an art school, and if you fail, then it's kind of like, well, I did the assignments, I did what I was supposed to do, I tried really hard, and I failed, and therefore maybe I went to a bad school. Or maybe it's like, well, now I just have a ton of debt, I can't pay this off with an art job. And so it's like, again, it's not really your fault. Maybe it's the bank's fault for giving you a loan, or the government's fault for giving you a loan. And the thing that sucks about that is, if that is the fear, then you have to live such a crappy life just because of that. Like, wow, so you didn't want to take responsibility, so now you're not doing art, and you're not, like, you've got a bunch of debt. Like, I don't know, to me that is very sad to be in that situation. And I mean, okay, so if you've got different stories of your art school thing, feel free to write them in the comments, because I'm just talking from my experience and the experience of people I've talked to. And so the people that did really well in art school were the ones who were doing stuff on the side and also came into school with a lot of experience. So for me, those people were already responsible. Like, they knew, I may not get anything from the school, so I'm going to take this into my own hands, and I'm going to become successful no matter what. And the thing is with the fear is that idea of, oh, what if I work really hard and I try my best and I don't make it? Well, the reality is, if you put in enough mileage and you're very hardworking, it's not really that way. It's just, you don't get to decide when you are good enough, because that's like with some people, they'll work for a year and get really good. Other people, 2 years. For people like me, probably 10 years. And I still don't think I'm very good. So, well, but it takes a long time. So my, I guess, advice is, or recommendation is, to really don't think anyone can give you anything except you. Like, it's all dependent on you. And for a lot of people that's scary, but for me that's kind of liberating, because it meant I don't have to rely on anyone. Like, if someone's to blame, I know exactly who. I know it's like, oh, I didn't work hard enough, or I didn't, like, that's easy. I can just look at myself and like, you screwed up. And because it's me, I know what I did, right? Like, if it's someone else, you might not know, well, what did they actually do wrong? But if it's yourself, then it's easier to look at yourself and say, okay, what did I really do wrong? And the other thing I noticed is that, like, okay, so that requires a lot of belief in yourself, which, again, I don't have a ton of belief in myself. I have pretty low self-esteem, but I did this anyway because I feel like, well, I don't want to, like, to me, the scariest thing is becoming unsuccessful with this. And it's like, well, as long as I don't give up, I'm still in the game, you know? So I think with this belief thing, what it does for you is it just makes it so, okay, so you're just doing things for yourself. But then I started to think that on top of that, people really do know what's good for them. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like this is the case, because I keep talking to students and maybe people who aren't students, but just artists in general, or anyone. And I ask them, because they'll say, oh, I want to be this and I want to get good, and do you have any advice? And what should I do? And every time I ask, well, what do you think you should do? Or what do you think would be good to do to get successful? They seem to know the answers. And so I think this is another thing that's really important, is to, in taking responsibility and believing in yourself, you also have to trust that you're probably the best person for knowing how you should improve, and not rely so much on other people. Because I think that, again, is in a way giving up responsibility. Because it sounds nice, like, well, I consulted this person who knows much more. They're already successful. And so, well, I asked their advice and I did what they said. Well, that's fine, because they do know if they're in the industry, or they've got the job you want, or whatever, or they're just at the level you want. Okay, so they do know some things. They know how it is to be in that job. They know how it was for them to get in the job. But what they don't know is who you are and what works for you. And so many times I found that what works for me is not the stuff I hear on videos. Like, maybe all the stuff I'm saying right now with the art school, maybe that won't work for you. But again, it comes down to being true to yourself, like asking yourself honestly, who am I and what works for me? And then really thinking about it, like, what do I need to become successful? And how do I work best? And how can I use what I have and who I am and still become successful? So for me, it was a thing of, I don't have a ton of stamina. I don't have a ton of passion. I have issues with depression and things like that. So, like, for instance, with depression, one of the things is, when I get depressed, and when most people get depressed, you really lose all motivation. You lose the willingness to want to do stuff. Often you get, like, spiraling thoughts that everything becomes quite negative. What's the point of this? I don't even like this. I don't know. I suck. Stuff like that. And it affects all areas in your life. But what I learned is, what helps me against depression is routine. So with routine, I'm going to draw every day, because that's what I do. It doesn't matter if I'm in a good mood or if I'm in a bad mood. It doesn't matter if the result is good or bad. That's my way of overcoming it. It's like, fine, I may draw a week's worth of bad drawings. And for anyone who's seen my Pointy Chin series and gotten to the episode where I was using Bristol, you got an insight into how it is. Like, you get really, really bad. And so, or you can get really bad. And for me, I did for a while. So just having the routine means what do I need to do? Well, I need to be drawing a lot, right? That's very important. Building up mileage, and just because there's many tiers of getting good. There's your analytical mind improving, your vision, being able to see more flaws, having more information, so knowledge, understanding things about light and how light works and where shadows fall and things. But there's also this very basic primitive thing, which is just muscle memory and being able to put a line where you want it to go. And that is just practice. Like, that doesn't even require thinking or tutorials or anything. It's just how many years or how many hours. I think hours is much better than years, because with years you might think, I've been drawing for a few years, but it's like, well, maybe you've been drawing for a few years, but how many hours do you actually draw? Oh, maybe I draw an hour a week. Well, someone who draws, 60 hours a week or 70 hours a week is doing 70 times as much work as you. So in the span of a year, that's like your 1 year is equivalent to their 70 year, or wait, their 1 year is equivalent to your 70 years. Sorry. So if you've been doing 2 years of work where you do 1 hour a week, and they've been doing 2 years where they do 70 hours a week, then you would need to be 140 years old to get as much experience as they have in 2 years. So it's much more important to think about this in terms of hours then. Like, how many hours are you putting in every day to your craft? And that will start to develop this, just changing your brain, making your brain good at a task. Very similar to just walking or something, right? Like, you don't have to put all this energy in or any physical task. It's more about, well, maybe playing the piano and hitting the notes, right? That's a lot of that has to do with just your brain being rewired. It's not that you don't know the notes. It's not that if someone said, oh, what notes should you be pressing? You wouldn't be able to answer. Of course you can answer that. But it's like, well, I can explain all of this, but I can't actually do it. And the way you're able to do it is by building up this muscle memory / experience, mileage. That's why I keep talking about mileage, because a lot of people will ask me, what do I do to get better? And their problem isn't their lack of thought or their lack of understanding. It's just they don't have this ability. They haven't been doing it enough. And maybe they're just not putting enough hours in a day toward their craft. So I think that's something that's super important. And when people talk about visual library, a visual library is really important. You need to be observing the things around you, and that helps you build as a person, as an artist. It helps to add stuff. Like, think of it this way. Fine, you have a library, right? So you have a bookshelf, and that's full of books. And the books you put in the bookshelf are your visual library. But the ability to read in the first place, to actually know what you're because, hey, what use is a book if you can't read? I think that comes from the initial, you need to draw enough to get beyond a certain point that, okay, you're fluent in this language, you can actually read. And then as you read more, you get faster at reading. And as you draw more and you build up your mileage, what happens is it's like someone just carts in an empty bookshelf, and it's like, oh, I can fill this up with more stuff. Like, I feel like now I can remember so much. Like, I don't have a good visual memory, but I've drawn enough that I don't even need it, because you get this sort of second sense where I know where to put the mark. Why do I know where to put the mark? Because I've put it down a bunch of times, and sometimes it's wrong and sometimes it's right. And I've done it right enough of the time that it starts to stick. Like, I know, no, do this move and not that move. It's sort of second nature. And so the other thing is, once you've done that, you start anticipating things. Before you put down a mark, your brain starts to imagine all the possible marks that you could put down from all the times you did draw it, right? So maybe I'm drawing an angle, and it needs to be a 45-degree angle. And I've tried to draw that 45-degree angle, and sometimes I hit 50, sometimes I hit 30, sometimes I hit 42, 43, sometimes I hit 45. if you, let's say you hit all of them only once, you only hit 45 once. Well, now your brain has the same amount of chance of hitting that as any other of the possibilities. Like it could hit 45 or it could hit 42. But since you're trying to hit 45, if you happen to practice again, you'll probably hit like, the more you practice, like 40, then 44, 43, 45, 42, 45, 46, 45, 43, 45, and then 45 will keep getting reinforced because that's the one you're trying to hit, and that's the one you've hit so often. And then later you're going to draw a picture, and then your brain will start to imagine like, okay, all the 43s, all the 44s, all the 46s, and here's the 45, and that's where you put it down. It's kind of weird. It feels sort of like, I don't know, magic, but you can do it. Because I used to look at people drawing and it's like, whoa, how did they do that? That looks like magic. How do they know where to put stuff? Because I couldn't even get eyes like to look right. I would draw the right eye and I would draw the left eye. And it's like, how do I make it look like they're both the same? They don't even look like they're the same. But after you do this so many times, it's not hard anymore. So, I don't know. I think being self-taught and taking responsibility for yourself is super important. And by self-taught, I mean, not that you don't look at books, not that you don't watch videos or that you don't seek out information or listen to anyone, but more that even if you go to school, you're someone who seeks out knowledge on your own. You're someone who has an idea in mind and you trust yourself and you believe that, yes, I can do that. Because really you can do it. It just takes time. So the idea that what if I work really hard and don't become successful, it's not going to happen. Not that I've seen anyway. Maybe if there's some really, I don't know, maybe there's some physical disability or something that may be fine. But for the most part, and every single person I've talked to and that I've met who is successful, it's just, no, you keep going and eventually you get better. So just not trusting in anyone else to make you successful, and rather make yourself successful and trust yourself that, you probably do know how to get good and you probably do know what works for you. And like, if you ask someone who's overweight, do they know how to, lose weight or be healthy? I think they do. I think it is like, well, I need to eat right and exercise. It's not like that's new. It's not like you ask a overweight person, oh, do you know how to lose weight? It's by eating right and exercising. And they go, whoa, eating right and exercising? I didn't know that was a thing. Wow. It's like, no, they know it. It's just hard. It's hard to do. It takes discipline. It takes focus. And so that's really your job, is to be disciplined and focused and to not be looking for the easy answers and not shirking off your responsibility. Because like, okay, maybe you'll find, oh, there's a video online and it's selling for $150 and it's promising, oh, I'm going to teach you all this stuff. It's like, okay, do you really, really believe that you're going to watch a video and you're going to magically become better without actually hours and hours and hours of work? It's not going to happen. But if you don't think I'm right, okay, fine. Try it and see what you think. Maybe, okay, if you have had this experience where, I don't know, then write it in the comments. And because I've watched videos that are very good, but they've all been knowledge-based, not I will make you a good artist, because nothing does that for you. It just gives you more information and teaches you things that it's like, okay, now I have to practice that anyway, because it's not going to work if you don't practice it. So anyway, sorry about the rant. That was really long. I hope this helped someone, and thanks for watching.